Thank you. My name's Geoff Crowhurst, and I'm appearing I'm the chairman of the Katherine Mining Services Association.
Thank you.
And would like to represent them today, our organisation.
Thank you.
So the first part that I would like to touch on is in regard to industry and the struggle that we have at present through the Katherine region with seasonal operations, that the ebbs and flows of the likes of the live cattle, export, tourism and agriculture. All of these industries and others are very seasonal, and we have to ramp up and ramp down to accommodate those industries, which tend to lend to shorter term jobs in our service provision businesses, which is what KMSA was developed for, a voice for the service providers of our region. All of these industries are viable industries for us to service, but struggle, as I said, with the ups and downs of keeping our people in permanent work, where we see the onshore gas operations to provide stabilisation of workforce in year-round continuous operations. Those year-round continuous operations being that all-weather roads and access would need to be put in to allow that to happen, which in turn would provide more work for our industry participants in the servicing and maintaining and the building of all of those infrastructure requirements. And then the maintenance as well. If those are continuous operations, there's always continuous maintenance as equipment is utilised and upgraded or moved to new sites, and that can continue on for long-term longevity. Some other industries that we deal with, defence being one of those, speak of in the shipbuilding industry of the valley of death, and these are where we need to continuous build ships, not come and go with the shipbuilding, and the businesses that fold when the continuous operations aren't continued. These are in a smaller situation in our businesses here in the Katherine region than what they would be with shipbuilding, obviously, but there's still the same feel of those ebbs and flows of what they speak of as the valley of death. That's probably a bit of a harsh term, but I'm just sort of using it to show that it does happen out even in remote regions as well. So the next thing I'd like to touch on is apprenticeships that flow on from the continuous operations of an industry. We, in a lot of our apprenticeships throughout our members presently, are at probably a 5-year low, and I think I touched on this in our first inquiry as well. Continuous industries help us to provide that opportunity to upskill our local youth and not have them leave our districts. That's one of our other problems, that our youth don't have opportunity to get the training in their younger years that then bring them along to industries that they can spread out into. So we see some very large benefits in the gas industry being in our backyard for those reasons. And not only apprenticeships, but traded positions as well for those apprentices when they've finished their time, that they can then move into being a long-term tradesperson in our district and possibly even developing their own businesses thereafter. I must admit, as an apprentice, where I did my apprenticeship in the rice growing industry in New South Wales, I never saw that I would ever need to address a group like we are today. So you just never know where things can take you when you're younger. But if you use your opportunities when you are young, those things become available. And I've addressed all sorts of groups in my later years of my trade, and I still run a business here in town while I'm also out and about for presentations of all sorts. So we also see spin-off new business opportunities from the gas industry. Some of those I'll just touch on. Wastewater treatment facility is probably a big one that we don't have presently in the territory, and there are other needs for wastewater treatment outside of the gas industry. And presently we have to transport our wastewater across into Queensland to have it processed and dealt with, which is not an ideal situation. So the lack of that facility in the territory presently has its challenges for other operators as well. Katherine being as central as it is in the territory, or the Katherine region, Tennant Creek, Katherine, anywhere in this area, that facility could be quite well utilised. Right across the developing the north region that we speak of, which is the top of Northern Territory, or all of the Northern Territory, and top of Queensland, top of Western Australia. There's no facility in that whole region, so that could provide quite a few jobs here in Katherine and mitigate problems of travelling waste products a lot further distance. This could also support something that I and others on the Economic Development Committee working to with the government on a industrial hub. So they're the sort of businesses that could be housed out in that industrial hub and make that a more usable process for getting that up and going for us. The government's in support of that industrial hub and has done quite some work on that. You talk to some of the people that have been around in Katherine for quite some time, and these things have been spoken about for a lot of years, but there has been a lot more movement in the last few years. KMSA is actually formulating a strategy to work in conjunction with the Northern Territory Government in investment pitch to some leading water cleaning companies for the setting up of a facility in the region. So we're actively in that process. It's early days, but these are opportunities that we see that we would like to capture for our community. The other one that I think would be able to be developed is a weed and seed process facility. This is something that could be very much done by an Indigenous group. We already see companies, and I'll use an example of Triple P contracting down in Elliot. This is the sort of thing that they would be very able to do and achieve. Presently, once again, there isn't anything in Katherine that looks after that requirement, and we don't even see many people using or the requirement at the moment, as in cattle industry, that sort of area, don't have any process much to it. There is a little bit, I think, but whenever we've worked with oil and gas or defence with the defence builds that are going on at Delamere and Tyndall presently. There are requests around weed and seed certification of equipment travelling through those regions. So compounding of these new businesses turns into jobs for our local people. Another fairly new initiative that KMSA is working on is getting an information office for the education of all community here in Katherine around the gas industry. We've heard that there is a similar sort of outlet in Roma, and I think, you know, just the opportunity for all people to come to a little hub, I suppose, that would provide us all with information regarding the industry that we're all trying to make a decision about. And KMSA is active in that process at the moment, so we're going to keep moving with that and see if we can get something here for people to educate themselves. So economic impacts, we've seen the development of local businesses achieving up to triple ISO accreditation to operate, and we thank the gas industry for some of this elevation of local industry participants. When you see the need for those requirements, that helps provide the need to actually step your business up. If it's not required, it's not worth spending the money to achieve these accreditations. But once you have achieved those accreditations, it's amazing the doors that can open for your business. So it's that chicken and the egg, getting yourself organised to go out and spend the money, but once you've done that, bringing home some other customers that you may not have come across before. And we all know that in the oil and gas industry, that's where we're going to have to move to. So there's quite a few businesses in Katherine who are, or some that have achieved that already and some that are moving towards that. I'd just like to touch on regulations. We need, I think, to have a flexible enough to allow exploration to be achieved and record data, so that we're working with the facts. Throughout this whole process, the facts are the important part, and if we haven't achieved and documented those facts, that can make it hard to make an informed decision. And the regulations to move forward from that point to provide an evidence-based regulatory system. And I suppose, you know, that can be quite a live system all the time as things change. The last point that I'd like to make is that KMSA would like to offer one of our members to accompany the field visits on the pastoral leases for an objective insight into pastoral industry practice and management of the resources. So we have, you know, people in our group that have been here a long time and worked across a lot of different industries throughout the region. So if you think that'd be any sort of benefit, we'd like to offer someone to go with you when you do your field visits.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crowhurst. When the moratorium was imposed, did you or do you know of any businesses that suffered a downturn in their business as a result of the moratorium? We have heard some reports of businesses which had to lay off people, lay off staff, and
Yeah, well, I can talk direct from my own business that's been involved with the oil and gas industry for the last 5 years, right through from the clearing of the seismic lines through to last year. We've had work every year in the dry season, and this year we have none at all. Our own workforce has dropped from about 40 down to 15 at present, 12 to 15, so that hasn't all come from the moratorium, but it certainly has had quite an effect, and we were expecting to be ramping up a lot more in our service provision to the oil and gas providers, where we've totally stopped. So, and that's our business alone, but there are others that are in the same situation. A lot of businesses closed in town. If you drive through the main street, you see shops that are shut. They may not be directly involved, but they are indirectly involved. It'd be amazing to watch how far a dollar travels and where it goes, I'd imagine. But yeah, there's definitely a downturn, and there would be some of that come from the moratorium, definitely.
but you feel confident enough to speak from your own first-hand experience about the effect it's had on your business.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Any further questions? I'll start from the end and work my way up. Yes, Professor Priestley.
Mr. Crowhurst, you mentioned that the provision of all-weather roads would be of benefit to everyone in the region. One of the issues that we've identified as a potential risk associated with the development of the industry is increases in traffic density and so on. What impact do you think that would have on the local region if there were a large increase in large trucks and so on moving equipment?
I think we've only got to look to the Queensland, infrastructure build, and yeah, there was a rise in the traffic for a period of years, and I'm thinking, 2 to 3 years, but then it wanes off after that once the operation is actually operational. So it's only the infrastructure build side where there's a large increase in traffic. I don't see it being anywhere near what we see running down our north-south highway. I wouldn't see it being anything like even that. So no, I don't think the impact's going to be detrimental. I think it'll be more positive than anything.
Yes, Dr. Anderson.
Mr. Crowhurst, I was just wondering if you could give us an indication if development were to proceed and your business were to ramp up to back to 40 or more, to what extent would you be able to source that capability locally here in Katherine, or you would need to sort of import that capability?
There'd be a mixture of, there is capability here in Katherine that we would bring back into our business, and we would also look to bring families from outside into Katherine and bolster our community, get the numbers back up. We've been losing families out of Katherine for the last few years. So we'd like to think that we would first always be trying to employ close in around our region, and then bring families back.
Sorry. Yes, Professor Hart.
I had a question relating to the all year round operations.
Yep.
You extolled the virtues, the benefits, workforce benefits.
Yep.
They're probably pretty clear. I was just wondering if you'd thought through some of the problems, issues with a year-round onshore gas industry operation.
Yeah, and it's in, once again, those early stages of when the development's happening, and that would be the time when the most danger is. But it's not uncommon to have facilities, other mine sites capture their water and keep it on site, and have done for 40 to 50 years here in the Territory. It's not an unusual thing to develop your site so that you contain all site water. So runoff, your contaminated runoff is actually put through a system. We have a uranium mine in the middle of Kakadu National Park, which I actually worked at for 6 years, and the systems are old and very simple, and they work right down to wetland filters that have a heap of plants in the filter that actually take the contaminants out of the water as it flows through. Some of these systems aren't high-tech at all. They're actually very organic, how they work. And it's not new. We've been controlling water on mine sites for a lot of years, and there's been certainly a lot learned in that time, and I think that would be where you would go to make sure you had the right development of a site in its early stages, but once it's in operation of drawing gas, it goes back to just a minute little area that you actually got a wellhead at.
Can I just explore that a bit further? You're right, Ranger, but Ranger's got lots and lots of bitumen roads out to Jabiru, the old Jabiru East and so forth. This would be a very dispersed industry with wellheads and so forth, 4 or 5 kilometres from each other. I take your point about the wastewater treatment. That's doable. There are issues and all the rest of it, as you point out. What about the transport, particularly if there was year-round operation of the actual hydraulic fracking process? What would you see as would you see it mandatory that there are bitumen roads to the sites? I mean,
wherever possible, most definitely. But once the way I understand anyway, the fracking is the start of the well, and it may only get fracked once in its life, but it may get fracked a few times in its life, depends on the actual well itself. So, we're talking about a smaller part of the life of a possible well that might be 20 or 30 years in its life, and it gets fracked, say, in a first part, and then you haven't got that problem.
Agreed.
So then, it's more around the service and maintenance, being able to get to that wellhead for repairs, maintenance, or just servicing and data control, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. But that part, I wouldn't downplay the time at which it's going to take. Now, if you've got a well head that's got say 8 or 10 laterals, that's a lot of drilling and a lot of fracturing. So that's likely to occur over. I couldn't imagine it's going to be done in less than 8-10 months. So that means inevitably they'll want to have big equipment on site.
And that equipment, is mainly there to get it in there to start with, and then then the getting it back out and moving it to the next site. Yes, it'll have service operations around that to get in other, but the main heavy stuff goes in and stays there till the frack's finished. So you'd be looking more transportation of consumables, and that might be food for people and what have you as well. So all of those do need good roads to get that to happen all year round. I think you look at Ranger. If Ranger hadn't have been there, there still would not be a road going out to that area. You'd still be travelling possibly a dirt road that came out at the old Jim area there. You talk to some of the people that used to travel those roads, and it wasn't fun. Might look good in books and written up in books, but it wasn't fun.
Thank you very much. Look, can I just go on to another? You you gave us a list of potential new businesses, you know, if there's a gas industry. I just wondered if you'd had any discussions with any of the three major players, Origin, Santos and Pangaea, about possibilities. How do they view it?
Yeah, we have had some early discussion. It's sort of the things that we're moving through. Thing with KMSA, we're all volunteers and we all run our own businesses and we can only divert so much time to it. We'd certainly like to divert a lot more if we could. So those discussions are in early stages, but they're obviously a support mechanism to what would be tried to be achieved. So yes, they are interested.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, Dr. Beck.
Thank you very much. Just to follow up on some of the previous questions there, just wanting to explore this issue of trying to have more constant employment throughout the year. So, given that in the wet season, I think you mentioned additional hydraulic fracturing and cleaning out of wells and so forth. So, but that would be work that would be undertaken mainly by the big specialist hydraulic fracturing organisations such as Schlumberger. What role do you see the service industry is playing in that space, particularly in that wet season that you were talking about? And do you see that your workforce would be maintained, drop off dramatically, or just drop off a small amount in that wet season phase of the work?
Any other mine site that I've been on still maintains the same requirements all the way through. So I would see that we would be continuous with the people that we were servicing, because you know, they need to be able to call on you to provide the service, so you need to have the people there ready to go at that particular time. And you know, also being that we haven't had this industry in our district before, so there's some unknowns for sure. But I think there's a little bit of confusion, or not confusion, but we get caught up with the rainfall of Darwin, related to that a lot, and we're 50% or less. Like last year, the rainfall for Darwin was nearly a record of 3 metres up there, where ours was 1.2. And we ranged down as low as half a metre. So and the further you move south, the more that changes. So I think, you know, there's a little bit of wrapped up into what Darwin gets, and that coastal fringe, very different to where we are and down to the Beetaloo Basin.
But presumably during the wet, you wouldn't be able to do major road making activities or seismic line clearing. Would you say that those large jobs would be much more difficult during the wet season?
They're more difficult, but sadly enough, we watch our roads get built every year in the wet season here because of when the government releases the money, you know, because of our financial year when it falls, and when, you know, money's allocated, a lot of our road works is actually done in the wet season. And it's not the best time, but there's operators here that have been doing it for generations and they're good at it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Two other brief questions. You mentioned about KMSA are active at least at looking at starting up an information office to give out information on the oil and gas industry. What role is KMSA playing, and how does that relate to some of the big gas companies as well, and who's taking the lead in this initiative?
Well, we've taken the lead, but we're, you know, looking for support from all groups to want to, you know, have their information in there as well, so that you know, it's an education shop, I suppose you'd say. I think that's one of the problems with the whole why we're sitting here having an inquiry because people aren't educated in what it is and what it can achieve and the problems around it as well. So that's where we see it as an opportunity, a little bit more touch and feel and see type thing,
Yes.
with some interactive. We're not exactly sure what that's going to be. This is a fairly new concept that we've put out. So yeah, hopefully it'll go somewhere.
Setting up such undertaking is challenging in many dimensions, but one of them is resources as well too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
is the KMSA in a position to resource that, or are you going to...
No, we would help out in
Yes.
our time that we can, but also we'd be looking to the other that want to have information in there to helping us as well.
Sure. Okay. And finally, you mentioned triple ISO accreditation. Can you just give us a very brief overview of what you mean by triple ISO?
Oh, well, the 14,001 and the 4801 and 9,001 accreditations. One of our local companies, security company, have just achieved that. So they're the sort of requirements and the uplifting of our local business to those levels. Yeah.
But how would that be relevant to sort of the gas? If the government lifted the moratorium, how would that be relevant? So what sort of accreditation, triple ISO accreditations, would businesses try and obtain?
From what we understand, those help you to work with the gas industry companies. They have got those accreditations themselves, and then they need other companies to be able to work to that level, and it makes it more acceptable if your company has those accreditations to work direct to the gas industry and other industries. It's federal government contracts require all those accreditations as well. So being able to afford those is one of the problems that we have at the moment because of this up and down seasonal industries that we have presently. Yeah.
So the triple ISO accreditation, I suspect that's a lot of increased documentation and training of staff. Are they some of the key elements that you would be expected to undertake if you were going to achieve triple ISO accreditation?
Yeah, so your procedures and documentation and training, and it rolls into a lot of different areas for you to get your accreditation passed, and then it's a matter of holding on to it as well. It's it's not just as simple as getting it; it's maintaining it from thereafter as well. But you need to have industry around you that make it viable.
Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Ritchie.
Hi, Mr. Crowhurst. We've spent a bit of time, as you probably know, down in Roma, Chinchilla and Miles and some of those communities. And one of the things that's come out, everybody is saying with hindsight, we would have sort of, knowing what was happening, we would have planned better for capturing a longer term future for our towns, getting our young people into the apprenticeships, as you've said, and it's always a bit of a constant battle because the industry takes what it wants when it needs it, and it'll fly it in if you haven't got it, and all that. So I guess you've been thinking a lot about this, and because while we all know there's going to, if it goes ahead, there'll be a lot of work being done really fast, and you've talked about roads, but some of the other things you talked about, like the water treatment businesses, there's a high likelihood that they'll come in from outside and come and go. So what's your kind of business thinking about how we kind of can plan to get locals involved or to bring people in and keep them here for an extended period? And just interested to know how your kind of thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's definitely be an outside company. There's not people here with that expertise presently, but it's jobs, simple as that. it's going to provide jobs, and it's, you know, easier to employ someone here in Katherine than bring people and try and house them. So, you know, there's a good resource pool here. So that then brings training requirements. And eventually people move up in those industries to, you know, move into the higher level positions as time goes on. So, yeah, compounds, I think.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Mr. Crowhurst, thank you very much for coming today and making your time available. I know you're busy, as is all the people who present here in front of the inquiry, and so we're very grateful for the effort that you've made. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for giving me the opportunity.